Introduction and contextual framework. In the ever-evolving discourse of selfhood and authenticity, few thinkers have contributed as profoundly as Carl Gustav Jung. As a Swiss psychiatrist and the founder of analytical psychology, Jung ventured beyond clinical theory into deeply philosophical and spiritual terrain. Central to his work is the belief that individuals possess an inner voice, a psychological compass rooted in the self, which is distinct from the ego or the conditioned mind. This voice, Jung believed, offers the most truthful guidance one can access. Yet, modern life encourages conformity, conditioning individuals to prioritize societal expectations over personal intuition. The question arises, what changes when a person begins to heed this internal voice over the multitude of external influences? Jung's philosophy suggests that our inner voice is more than a fleeting feeling or irrational impulse. Rather, it is the whisper of the unconscious, the synthesis of inherited wisdom and personal experience stored in the collective unconscious. To follow this voice is not merely a psychological shift, it is a philosophical act of individuation. In doing so, individuals reject the tyranny of the herd instinct, stepping into a space of profound self-exploration. This transition often marks the beginning of a psychological and existential journey that redefines one's identity and place in the world. In this essay, we explore what happens when a person stops listening to others and starts listening to their inner voice, using Carl Jung's theories as a foundational framework. We will delve into the psychological constructs of persona, shadow, and self, the philosophical challenges and promises of individuation, and the existential implications of listening inward in a world saturated with outward noise. This analysis positions Jungian thought not just as a psychological tool but as a deeply resonant guide for modern philosophical living. The persona and the voice of others. One of Jung's core concepts is the persona, the social mask each person wears to function within society. The persona is essential for maintaining relationships, holding jobs, and participating in culture. However, problems arise when individuals over-identify with this mask, believing it to be their true self. This over-identification leads to psychological repression, as aspects of the true self, what Jung calls the shadow, are buried to maintain external approval. When individuals prioritize external validation, they become increasingly alienated from their inner truth. This phenomenon is particularly pronounced in contemporary society. From childhood, individuals are taught to seek approval from parents, teachers, peers, and institutions. Cultural narratives define success, happiness, and morality, often leaving little room for internal reflection. As a result, people may climb the societal ladder only to find themselves spiritually bankrupt, having achieved external success at the cost of inner peace. This dissonance can manifest as anxiety, depression, or a pervasive sense of meaninglessness. When one begins to turn away from the external voices and engage with their inner world, a rupture often occurs. Listening to the inner voice can lead to conflict, internally and socially. The individual may find that their true values, desires, or aspirations contradict societal norms. Jung saw this as a necessary confrontation. The discomfort of this dissonance is the first step toward individuation, a process that demands courage, reflection, and often solitude. Individuation and the shadow. Jung coined the term individuation to describe the process by which a person becomes whole and integrated, aligning their conscious identity with the deeper layers of the unconscious. This process often begins when one stops obeying the expectations of others and starts listening to their inner voice. However, individuation is not a path of comfort. It involves encountering and integrating the shadow, the parts of the psyche that have been suppressed or denied. The shadow is not inherently negative. It contains repressed instincts, desires, and potential that the conscious mind has rejected due to fear, shame, or social conditioning. Ignoring it leads to psychological imbalance, while integrating it leads to self-knowledge and empowerment. The inner voice often speaks through dreams, emotional reactions, or intuitions, drawing attention to what the ego refuses to acknowledge. Jung believed that facing the shadow was essential for spiritual maturity. As the individual engages in this inner dialogue, they begin to feel a sense of authenticity and liberation. They no longer act out roles assigned by culture or family, but begin to live from a place of inner alignment. This stage of the journey often includes solitude, discomfort, and resistance from the external world. Friends and family may not understand the changes occurring. However, this alienation is often a sign of deep psychological transformation. It is, in essence, the birth pangs of the true self. Archetypes, dreams, and symbols. Jung asserted that the inner voice often communicates through symbolic language, the language of dreams, art, myth, and archetypes. Archetypes are universal patterns or motifs found in the collective unconscious, and they manifest in recurring symbols across cultures and time. The inner voice may appear as the wise old man, the nurturing mother, the hero, or the trickster in dreams and fantasies. To listen to the inner voice, one must learn to interpret these symbols with humility and openness. This symbolic language challenges modern rationality. Contemporary culture favors logic, evidence, and linear thinking, while the inner voice often speaks in riddles, metaphors, and paradoxes. Jung emphasized the importance of active imagination and dream analysis to bridge this gap. By journaling, meditating, or working with therapists trained in depth psychology, individuals can develop a dialogue with their unconscious and gain insight into their deeper self. Moreover, symbols act as bridges between the conscious and unconscious mind. When we ignore them, we risk missing vital messages from the psyche. But when we engage with them, we foster inner harmony and creative insight. This integration of unconscious content is a major component of individuation. The more we attune ourselves to our inner voice, the more we learn to trust the process, even when it defies external logic or approval. Freedom, responsibility, and ethical living. From a philosophical standpoint, listening to the inner voice aligns with existentialist ideals of authenticity and freedom. Thinkers like Søren Kierkegaard, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Friedrich Nietzsche also emphasize the importance of living according to one's own values rather than conforming to societal norms. Jung adds a psychological layer to this argument. Inner freedom requires self-knowledge, and self-knowledge requires inner listening. With freedom, however, comes responsibility. To live authentically is not to live selfishly. Jung insisted that those who listen to their inner voice must also confront the ethical implications of their actions. The self does not operate in isolation, it is part of a larger psychic and cosmic whole. Living from the inner voice means living in alignment not only with personal truth, but also with universal principles of harmony and respect. True individuation is not narcissism, it is integration. The individuated person contributes to society not by conforming to it, but by bringing their authentic self into it. Such individuals become beacons of transformation, creativity, and depth. They challenge others to look inward and reclaim their own inner voice. In this way, the journey of the self becomes an act of service to humanity. The inner voice in a modern world. In today's hyper-connected, digitally driven society, the challenge of listening to one's inner voice has never been greater. Social media, mass advertising, and consumer culture constantly shape public perception and self-image. People are inundated with messages about who they should be, what they should buy, and how they should live. This environment creates a cacophony that drowns out the subtle, often quiet voice of the self. Yet, this same cultural saturation has given rise to counter-movements. Mindfulness, minimalism, spiritual retreats, and the resurgence of interest in depth psychology. These practices reflect a collective yearning for reconnection with the inner self. Jung's ideas have found new relevance in these spaces. Therapists, coaches, and spiritual teachers increasingly draw from his work to help individuals access the inner voice amid external noise. Technology itself can become a tool for reflection if used wisely. Apps for journaling, meditation, and dream tracking can support the individuation process. However, these tools must be used intentionally, not as distractions or ego enhancers. Jung would argue that the inner voice is ultimately found not through apps or trends, but through silence, solitude, and sustained inner work. Becoming whole. Carl Jung's philosophy invites us to take a radical step, to stop living according to others' expectations and begin listening to our inner voice. This step initiates the process of individuation, a transformative journey toward psychological wholeness and philosophical authenticity. While it often involves discomfort, isolation, and social misunderstanding, the rewards are profound: inner peace, creative freedom, and a deep sense of meaning. The inner voice is not arbitrary or whimsical. It is the authentic expression of the self, a source of wisdom that connects us to the collective unconscious and the archetypal truths of human existence. When we listen to it, we begin to live with intention and integrity. We become not what the world wants us to be, but what we were always meant to be. In the end, the journey of turning inward is not just a personal act, it is a philosophical declaration. It says that truth, meaning, and freedom are not imposed from outside but discovered within. As Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." To stop listening to others, start listening to your inner voice is therefore not just an act of rebellion. It is an awakening to the fullness of your own being.